Blood spilled on the concrete as 4 elite operators scrambled backward, overwhelmed by a snarling 70-pound blur of teeth and fury. Naval Special Warfare's top handlers were entirely helpless. Nobody could break the dog's murderous trance until a crippled, forgotten veteran limped through the kennel doors and whispered a single word. Dust plumed into the stifling Southern California air as a massive Belgian Malinois slammed against the reinforced chain-link fence, the metal groaning under the sheer kinetic force of the animal's rage. Inside the high-security enclosure at Naval Amphibious Base, Coronado chaos had utterly consumed what was supposed to be a routine rehabilitation drill. Chief Petty Officer Wyatt Sullivan, a Tier 1 canine handler with a chest full of commendations and scars from Fallujah to Kandahar, leaned his entire body weight back on a heavy-duty nylon lead. His combat boots skidded across the concrete floor, leaving dark rubber streaks. At the other end of the fraying leash was Havoc 9, a dog that had evolved from a precision military asset into an uncontrollable nightmare. "Slack the line. Give him slack before he snaps his own neck," shouted Petty Officer First Class Ryan Foster, desperately trying to flank the animal with a specialized catch pole. "I can't!" Wyatt roared back, his biceps burning as the dog thrashed with terrifying, violent unpredictability. "If I drop tension, he takes Brooks's arm clean off." On the ground, trapped beneath the ferocious weight of the Malinois Chief Petty Officer, Nathan Brooks was fighting for his life. Brooks was wearing a 90-pound Kevlar-reinforced bite suit, designed to withstand the crushing jaw pressure of military-working dogs. But Havoc 9 was not merely biting. He was disassembling. The dog possessed a chilling, predatory intelligence. Realizing the thick padding over Brooks's forearms was impenetrable, Havoc had shifted his attack, driving his snout into the vulnerable joints of the suit, the armpit, the inner elbow, and the neck collar. A sickening tear of fabric echoed through the kennel as Havoc's teeth found a gap in the armor. Brooks let out a muffled scream, his helmet cracking against the concrete as he tried to shield his throat. Blood began to well up, staining the tan canvas of the suit. Standing safely on the observation catwalk above the enclosure, Base Commander Captain Gregory Hughes slammed his fist against the railing. "Enough! This drill is over. Get that animal off my operator, Sullivan." "We're trying, sir." Wyatt grunted, wrapping the leash around his forearm for better leverage. Havoc 9 was a legend in the Naval Special Warfare community, but for all the wrong reasons. 3 years prior, he had been the crown jewel of a specialized strike team operating deep within the Korangal Valley. His handler had been Staff Sergeant Liam O'Connor, a man who had practically raised the dog from a pup. During a catastrophic night raid, their compound was ambushed by a heavily armed insurgent cell. O'Connor was fatally struck in the initial volley of gunfire. For 3 agonizing days, a brutal sandstorm grounded all medevac and quick reaction forces. For 3 days, Havoc 9 stood over his handler's body. He fought off opportunistic scavengers, neutralized 2 enemy combatants who attempted to loot the dead, and refused to eat or drink. By the time the rescue element finally breached the compound, they found the dog half dead, dehydrated, and completely unhinged. Havoc had to be tranquilized just to recover O'Connor's remains. Ever since that operation, Havoc was broken. The psychological trauma had fractured his conditioning. He no longer saw friendly forces or handlers. He only saw threats. The smell of gun oil, the sound of Velcro tearing, or the silhouette of a man in tactical gear triggered a lethal instinctual kill response. The Navy had spent thousands of hours and dollars attempting to rehabilitate him, bringing in the finest canine psychologists on the West Coast. Nothing worked. Now the dog's aggression was peaking, and the tragic reality was setting in. Havoc was a loaded weapon with a broken safety, and the military had no choice but to decommission him permanently. "Dr. Owens, get in there right now," Captain Hughes barked over the intercom, his voice stripped of patience. "I am officially signing the order. Put the animal down. Lethal injection. Do it before he kills Brooks." Dr. Rebecca Owens, the lead veterinary officer for the base, stood shivering by the perimeter gate. In her trembling hands, she held a specialized pneumatic dart rifle loaded with a lethal overdose of barbiturates. Tears blurred her vision. She had spent the last 6 months trying to save Havoc's mind, sitting outside his cage for hours, reading to him in a soft voice just to get him accustomed to human presence again. But watching him tear into a seasoned seal like a rabid wolf, she knew the commander was right. The dog was suffering in a prison of his own traumatized mind. "Wyatt, I need a clear shot at his flank," Dr. Owens shouted, stepping into the edge of the enclosure, raising the heavy rifle to her shoulder. "No, Doc, wait. Just give me a second," Wyatt pleaded, his heart breaking. He had never lost a dog. To execute a decorated combat veteran in a cold, concrete kennel felt like a profound betrayal. "There is no time. Sullivan," Hughes roared from above. "Brooks is bleeding out. Shoot the damn dog, Doctor." Havoc 9 let out a guttural demonic growl, shaking Brooks with such violence that the heavy operator was lifted inches off the ground. The dog's amber eyes were dilated, entirely consumed by the endless loop of the firefight that played out in his shattered mind. He didn't know he was in California. He was still in the Korangal Valley. He was still protecting Liam. Dr. Owens held her breath, centering the crosshairs of the dart rifle on the dog's rippling shoulder muscle. Her finger tightened on the trigger. The heavy silence of impending death hung over the room, broken only by the terrifying snarls of the Malinois. But before she could squeeze the trigger, a harsh, metallic crash echoed through the facility, ringing out like a gunshot and freezing everyone in their tracks. A heavy grease-stained crescent wrench bounced across the concrete floor, clattering loudly against the steel gate of the enclosure. The sudden piercing noise was sharp enough to break Havoc 9's immediate focus. The dog released his grip on Brooks's collar, his head snapping toward the source of the sound. His ears pinned flat against his skull, and a low rumbling warning vibrated from his chest. Standing in the shadowy doorway of the kennel's mechanical room was Robert Callahan. To the elite seal handlers and the base brass, Bobby was essentially invisible. He was a 68-year-old civilian maintenance contractor who showed up at 0400 every morning to fix the HVAC units, scrub the drains, and repair the damaged fencing. He wore faded oil-stained denim jeans, a worn flannel shirt, and a battered baseball cap pulled low over his eyes. He walked with a severe, uneven limp, a permanent souvenir from a shattered femur and a botched field surgery half a century ago. Nobody knew much about him, and nobody asked. Bobby slowly wiped his greasy hands on a red shop rag, his pale blue eyes fixed intensely on the snarling Malinois. He didn't look at Captain Hughes. He didn't look at the bleeding operator on the ground. He only saw the dog. "Put the gun down, little lady," Bobby said. His voice was not loud, but it possessed a strange, resonant authority that cut through the chaotic ambience of the kennel. It sounded like gravel grinding against steel. Dr. Owens blinked momentarily, lowering the rifle. "Mr. Callahan, you need to leave. This is a restricted. Civilian, evacuate this area immediately." Captain Hughes bellowed from the catwalk, his face flushing crimson with anger. "We have a lethal situation down here. Security, get this man out of my kennels." Bobby ignored the commander completely. He took a slow, deliberate step forward, dragging his ruined right leg slightly. "You shoot that animal with that poison, and you're killing a soldier who hasn't been relieved of his post." Bobby said, his eyes narrowing as he analyzed Havoc 9's posture. "He ain't attacking you boys. He's defending a perimeter you keep breaching. Wyatt, still straining against the heavy leash, stared at the old janitor as if he had lost his mind. "Bobby, get back. He's going to break this line in a second, and if he gets to you, he will tear your throat out." "Drop the leash, son," Bobby instructed, mildly taking another step closer to the enclosure. "Are you insane?" Wyatt screamed, his boots slipping another inch across the concrete. Havoc 9 was beginning to realize Brooks was no longer moving aggressively, and the dog's hyper-focused amber eyes locked onto the new approaching figure. The Malinois bared its teeth, saliva flying from its jowls. "I said drop the damn leash," Bobby repeated, and this time the mildness was gone. The tone that erupted from the old man's chest was startling. It carried the unmistakable ironclad cadence of a battlefield commander. It was a voice that expected absolute obedience. Before Wyatt's brain could even process the command, his military conditioning took over. His hands instinctively relaxed, and the nylon lid slipped from his burning palms. Havoc 9 was instantly free. The kennel erupted into pandemonium. Dr. Owens screamed, scrambling backward. Captain Hughes drew his sidearm from his hip holster, aiming down from the catwalk. Brooks, lying on the floor, squeezed his eyes shut, expecting the final fatal bite. But Havoc didn't go for Brooks. The dog pivoted his muscular hind legs, digging into the concrete, and launched himself directly toward the chain-link gate where Bobby Callahan stood. Bobby didn't flinch. He didn't reach for a weapon. He didn't raise his arms to protect his face. Instead, he calmly reached to his heavy leather tool belt, pulled out a master key, and inserted it into the secondary gate's padlock. "Callahan, stop!" Wyatt yelled, drawing his own sidearm. He leveled the barrel at the dog, his finger resting on the trigger guard. He had a fraction of a second to shoot the animal before it eviscerated the old man. Click. Bobby pushed the heavy steel gate open and stepped directly into the enclosure. He had no bite suit. He had no padding. He was completely exposed. Havoc 9 charged. The 70-pound dog closed the distance in a heartbeat, a terrifying blur of muscle and predatory intent, launching himself into the air jaws, snapping open, aimed directly at Bobby's chest. At the exact moment the dog leaped, Bobby's demeanor underwent a shocking transformation. The elderly crippled janitor vanished. He dropped his limp. He straightened his spine. He squared his shoulders with militant precision. As the dog soared through the air, Bobby dropped swiftly to one knee, completely exposing his throat and chest, the ultimate submission in canine psychology. But he didn't cower. He extended one weathered, scarred hand palm, flat rigid as a board, and locked his pale blue eyes directly with the fiery amber eyes of the beast. And then, with the quiet intensity of a secret shared between ghosts, Bobby whispered a single word. "Ranger." It wasn't a standard command. It wasn't sit heel or stand down. It was a forgotten trigger buried beneath decades of evolving military canine protocols. Mid-air, Havoc 9's eyes widened. The dog's vicious momentum completely broke. Instead of clamping his jaws around Bobby's neck, the Malinois twisted his body, violently attempting to abort his own attack. He crashed hard into the concrete next to Bobby's knee, sliding several feet before scrambling frantically to his paws. The entire kennel fell dead silent. Wyatt froze, his gun still raised. Dr. Owens covered her mouth. Captain Hughes slowly lowered his weapon, his jaw dropping in absolute disbelief. Havoc 9 stood panting, trembling uncontrollably. He looked at the heavily armed SEALs, then looked down at the old man kneeling on the floor. Bobby didn't move an inch. He kept his flat hand extended. "Ranger," he whispered again, his voice cracking with a sudden, overwhelming emotional weight. The Malinois let out a sound that broke every heart in the room. It wasn't a growl. It was a high-pitched, desperate whimper. The dog took one hesitant step forward, lowering its head, and then collapsed entirely, burying its bloody snout into the crook of the old janitor's arm, crying like a frightened puppy. Silence draped over the concrete kennel, thick and suffocating. Wyatt lowered his sidearm, his hands trembling violently as the massive dump of adrenaline began to recede from his bloodstream. On the blood-streaked floor, Havoc 9, the unkillable demon of naval special warfare, was pressed firmly against the chest of a crippled janitor, whining softly like an abandoned pup. The fearsome Belgian Malinois, who had just seconds ago been attempting to rip a seasoned operator to shreds, was now entirely submissive. His amber eyes squeezed shut as Bobby Callahan's calloused hand gently stroked his ears. Dr. Rebecca Owens was the first to break the paralysis. She dropped the heavy pneumatic dart rifle and sprinted across the enclosure, dropping to her knees beside Chief Petty Officer Nathan Brooks. The operator was gasping for air, his face pale blood pooling from the severe lacerations near his collarbone where the bite suit had failed. "Medic, we need a corpsman down here right now," Dr. Owens screamed, applying immense pressure to Brooks's neck. Her voice shattered the trance that had gripped the room. Wyatt rushed forward to assist, keeping a wary eye on the dog. But Havoc didn't even twitch toward them. He remained buried in Bobby's embrace, shivering. Heavy boots pounded against the metal stairs as Captain Gregory Hughes descended from the observation catwalk. His face was a mask of absolute bewilderment and barely contained fury. He bypassed the medical triage entirely and marched straight toward the old maintenance man. "What in God's name just happened here?" Hughes demanded, his voice echoing off the cinderblock walls. "Oh, who the hell are you, Callahan? And how did you just override a Tier 1 canine's kill drive?" Bobby didn't look up immediately. He continued to soothe the trembling animal, his thumb rubbing rhythmic circles behind the dog's ears. Slowly, he shifted his weight, wincing as his ruined right leg protested the movement, and looked up at the base commander. The mild-mannered invisible janitor was completely gone. In his place sat a man whose eyes held the heavy, haunting stare of a combat veteran who had seen the absolute worst of humanity. "You boys rely too much on your modern manuals and your positive reinforcement clickers," Bobby said, his voice a low, gravelly rumble. "You teach these animals how to hunt, how to clear rooms, and how to kill. But you forgot the most important lesson of all. You forgot how to bring them back from the dark." Hughes crossed his arms, his jaw tightening. "I want an answer, Callahan. Now. That is classified military property, and you just compromised a controlled environment. His name is Havoc, Captain. He ain't property." Bobby countered, finally standing up. He patted his leg twice, and the 70-pound Malinois instantly rose, pressing his flank tightly against Bobby's good leg in a perfect protective heel. The SEAL handlers in the room exchanged stunned glances. That level of instantaneous obedience was impossible to achieve with a shattered dog. Bobby reached into the pocket of his greasy flannel shirt and pulled out a battered brass Zippo lighter. He flipped it open, the metallic clink ringing out loudly, and stared at the flame for a brief second before snapping it shut. 47th Scout Dog Platoon, Bien Hoa Air Base, Vietnam, 1968. Bobby stated quietly, letting the words sink into the room. "We ran German shepherds and bloodhounds deep into the jungle hunting Charlie in the dark. Our dogs didn't have Kevlar vests or titanium teeth. They had us. And when an ambush hit and the world exploded into fire and screaming, those dogs would lose their minds. The fear and the blood would trigger a predatory loop. They'd go deaf to everything. A standard command wouldn't cut through the noise." "Doctor," Owens, her hand stained with Brooks's blood as the medics finally arrived to stabilize him, looked up, mesmerized by the old man's words. "So we developed a kinetic breaker," Bobby continued, looking down at Havoc. "A fail-safe word. Something completely detached from normal operational commands. a word taught through deep psychological conditioning anchored to the dog's core nervous system during extreme stress inoculation training. When you say the word, it essentially reboots their brain. It pulls them out of the kill drive and forces submission to the alpha. For my unit, that word was Ranger. Wyatt stood slowly wiping sweat from his forehead. That's impossible. Havoc is a modern dog. He was trained at Lackland Air Force Base, then finished here in Coronado. That old-school MACVSOG conditioning hasn't been in the Navy's training curriculum for 40 years. How does he know that word? A shadow of deep sorrow passed over Bobby's weathered face. He looked at the spot on the concrete where Brooks's blood was drying. Because Liam O'Connor didn't train this dog by the Navy's book, Bobby said softly, his voice finally cracking. Liam was a good kid. He lived 3 houses down from me in Chula Vista. Used to come over on weekends to help me wrench on my old Ford pickup. When he made it through BUD/S and got tapped for the K9 program, he came to my garage. He was worried. Bobby paused, swallowing hard. Liam knew Havoc was different. The dog was too aggressive, too protective. Liam knew that if things ever went sideways, downrange, standard commands wouldn't stop Havoc from tearing a compound apart. So Liam asked me for help. For 6 months off the books in my dusty backyard, I taught Liam the old ways. I taught him how to install the breaker. The revelation hit the room like a physical shockwave. Liam O'Connor, the legendary handler, had secretly cross-trained his dog with an old, forgotten Vietnam veteran to ensure the animal could be saved from its own rage. When Liam died in the Korangal, Bobby whispered, staring into Captain Hughes's eyes, Havoc didn't just lose his handler. He got permanently stuck in the kill loop. He was waiting for Liam to say the word to bring him back. But Liam never did. For 3 years, this animal has been trapped in a firefight in his own mind, waiting for the breaker. Bobby rested his hand on Havoc's head. I didn't train him, Captain, but I trained the boy who did, and Havoc remembers the frequency. Captain Hughes paced the length of his austere command office, his heavy boots sinking into the carpet. The sprawling view of the Pacific Ocean outside his window offered no comfort. On his immaculate mahogany desk sat the formalized euthanasia order for Havoc 9. The ink was dry. The medical justification from the Navy Board was ironclad. Despite the miraculous intervention in the kennel 2 hours prior, the bureaucratic machinery of the United States military did not easily pivot. Seated on the worn leather couch opposite the desk was Bobby Callahan. He had refused to wash the grease from his hands or change his clothes. At his feet, resting calmly with his chin draped over Bobby's steel-toed boots, was Havoc 9. The dog's eyes tracked every movement the captain made, but there was no aggression, only a quiet, intense vigilance. Wyatt Sullivan stood by the doorway, his arms crossed silently supporting the old man. I hear what you are saying, Mr. Callahan, and what you did down there was extraordinary. Hughes began his tone, carrying the heavy burden of command. But you are asking me to release a highly classified lethal military asset into the custody of a civilian contractor. Do you understand the liability? If this dog triggers in a public park and kills a child, my career is over, and the Navy faces a monumental scandal. The breaker word worked once. I cannot guarantee it will hold permanently. With all due respect, sir, Wyatt interrupted, stepping forward. You saw the dog. He's completely reset. He's tracking Bobby like a shadow. If you execute that animal now after we finally cracked his trauma, you will lose the respect of every operator in the kennel. We don't leave our wounded behind, Captain. That includes the dogs. Stand down, Chief. Hughes snapped, though there was no real venom in his voice. He rubbed his temples genuinely torn. My hands are tied by regulation. Under standard operating procedure, an unrecoverable dog cannot be adopted. He is classified as a loaded weapon. I need legal cover to override a veterinary board's execution order, and an emotional story about a Vietnam veteran training my handler off the books does not satisfy the Judge Advocate General. Bobby reached into his flannel shirt and slowly pulled out a folded yellowed piece of paper. The edges were frayed, suggesting it had been carried in a pocket for a very long time. He placed it gently on the edge of the captain's desk. Liam knew the risks of his job, Bobby said quietly. He knew what the brass does to broken tools when they stop working. Before he deployed to Afghanistan for the last time, he came to my house. He asked me to hold on to this. Hughes frowned, picking up the piece of paper. He unfolded it carefully. It was a legally binding, notarized document. Under the Robbie Law signed by Congress in 2000, retired or decommissioned military working dogs can be adopted by their handlers, or in the event of the handler's death, their immediate family. Bobby explained, his voice steady and precise. Liam didn't have any family left. His parents passed when he was in high school, so he legally designated me as his next of kin for all matters regarding his personal estate. Hughes's eyes scanned the document. The legal phrasing was impeccable. Liam O'Connor had explicitly transferred ownership and custody rights of his military working dog Havoc 9 to Robert Callahan in the event of O'Connor's death in the line of duty, citing Callahan as his primary mentor and surrogate grandfather. The dog is legally mine. Captain, Bobby said softly. The Navy just didn't know it because I never stepped forward. I thought your doctors could fix him. I thought he belonged with his brothers in the SEAL teams. But watching him tear himself apart today, I realized Liam left him to me for a reason. He knew I was the only one who could handle the breaker. Hughes read the letter twice. He looked at the date signed just 2 weeks before Liam's fatal mission in the Korangal Valley. He looked at the dog, currently resting peacefully against the old man's leg, looking completely devoid of the demonic rage that had defined his existence for 3 years. Slowly, Captain Hughes picked up the euthanasia order. He stared at it for a long moment, the weight of the decision hanging in the silent office. Then, with a decisive, sharp movement, he tore the document in half. He dropped the pieces into his trash can. Chief Sullivan, Hughes said, his voice returning to its authoritative, crisp cadence. Process the decommissioning paperwork. Havoc 9 is hereby honorably discharged from active duty, effective immediately. Release him to the custody of his legal guardian. Wyatt smiled for the first time in months. Yes, sir. An hour later, the harsh afternoon sun was beginning to dip below the horizon, casting a golden hue over Naval Amphibious Base Coronado. Bobby Callahan walked out of the heavy blast doors of the kennel facility, wearing his faded baseball cap, his severe limp returning with each step. Beside him walked Havoc 9. There was no heavy nylon lead. There was no reinforced muzzle. The Malinois walked at a perfect loose-leash heel, matching the old man's uneven gait with instinctual precision. As they stepped into the courtyard, Bobby stopped. Lining the concrete pathway to the parking lot were 30 Naval Special Warfare operators. They were fully geared, standing shoulder to shoulder in complete silence. Among them stood Wyatt Sullivan and Dr. Rebecca Owens, her arm wrapped in a bandage from the earlier chaos. As Bobby and the dog moved forward, Wyatt barked a command. Present arms. 30 elite warriors snapped a crisp, razor-sharp salute. It was a gesture of profound respect, not just for the decorated combat dog who had saved countless lives, but for the forgotten, crippled ghost of a handler who had stepped out of the shadows to save him. Bobby didn't say a word. He didn't need to. He straightened his spine, ignoring the shooting pain in his leg, and returned the salute with perfect ear-accurate military precision. Havoc 9 sat instantly beside him, his chest puffed out, sensing the gravity of the moment. Together, the broken janitor and the shattered beast walked to a beat-up Ford pickup truck. Bobby opened the passenger door, and Havoc leaped inside, curling up on the worn bench seat. As the engine sputtered to life, and the truck rolled out of the base gates, the heavy burden of war finally began to lift. For the first time in years, both the old soldier and his dog were finally heading home. If this incredible story of loyalty trauma and the unbreakable bond between warriors touched your heart, don't keep it to yourself. Hit that like button, share this video with a friend or a fellow animal lover, and make sure to subscribe to our channel for more gripping real-life stories. Drop a comment below and let us know what you thought of Bobby and Havoc's unbelievable connection. Your support helps us tell the stories that deserve to be heard.